All right, so last lecture we looked at libertarianism about the will, which I'm just going to, kind of shorthand refer to libertarianism a lot, even though, it's different from political libertarianism. Just, keep that in mind. Libertarianism about the will versus determinism. And both determinists and libertarians will say responsibility, holding someone responsible for what they do, praising or blaming them, rewarding or punishing them, legally and in the sense of making them suffer bad consequences or, you know, giving them any kind of reward for behavior, all that requires that people be able to do otherwise. Now, there's another position, though, called compatibilism. Nagel actually calls this soft determinism. Compatibilists will say they're a lot different from determinists. I think Nagel's biasing the issue a little bit. I think to be fair, we should call it compatibilism. And so, compatibilism agrees with free will. Sorry, compatibilism disagrees. It really differs from free will libertarianism and determinism. And it differs from them right in this first step, this first premise. Compatibilism rejects the claim that responsibility requires that we be able to do otherwise. If you're a compatibilist, you say, look, you don't need to be able to do otherwise to be responsible for what you do. Now, I think there's immediately a challenge to this position, right? As I said, I think it's the common sense response that if people are responsible, they have to have been able to do otherwise. If they can't do otherwise, they're not responsible. And I think we should challenge the compatibilists and say, okay, well, if you're right, then why is it that we don't hold people responsible in all these cases where it looks like the action's out of their control? Why do we treat the narcoleptic falling asleep different than the dude who just won't put his phone down, right? Why do we treat the person with a learning disability differently than the person who's just lazy? Why do we let people off for crimes if we feel they were compelled? So on and so forth. Well, here's the compatibilist answer. Actions you're responsible for actions when they're linked to your character or the type of person you are in the right way. If the actions are not linked to your character in the right way, you're not responsible. Well, how's this supposed to work? Well, think of my example of the two different students, right? One is, by any definition, a good student. They are inquisitive, they're curious, they want to know stuff, they're hardworking. It just so happens that when they have this disease that's not properly treated, they're going to fall asleep, they can't pay attention in class. But falling asleep is not linked to their character in the way that normal actions are, right? Working hard, writing a really good paper is linked to this student's character in the right way. They are hard working. Asking good questions in class linked to her character in the right way, right? Inquisitive, curious person. Falling asleep, not linked to her character in the right way because she has a condition. Student who likes to text, well, that's all linked to his character in the right way, right? He's bratty, he's entitled, he's lazy, he has a poor attention span, all linked to him like not being able to even pretend to pay attention for an hour, right? An hour and 15 minutes, but whatever. Which I want to say, come on, right? Even if you don't like the class, trust me, in the working world, being able to pretend to pay attention when you're not is a valuable skill. I say this from many, many meetings. So come on. Even if you don't like the class, teaching you a valuable skill that will get you ahead in the working world. I didn't quite say it that way, right? I don't want to be quite that cynical openly. Okay. And you can think of this in other cases, right? Think of crimes, right? If someone is a horrible person who will murder, let's imagine some case where somebody is the next in line for the inheritance and they kill, say, their brother or a cousin or whoever for it. Why would we hold him responsible if we catch him? Well, killing this person is linked in the right way to his bad character. He's greedy. He's cruel. He's just an awful person, right? On the other hand, if he somehow suffered a compulsion, a mental break, that wouldn't be linked to his character in the right way, right? If he was mind controlled somehow, that wouldn't be linked to his character. That would be somebody else controlling him. In normal cases, our actions are linked to our character, the type of person we are. But in cases, where people have a disease or insanity, brainwashing, whatever, that link is gone or it's lessened, right? And in some cases it might not be neatly gone, right? Think about people under the influence of alcohol or drugs, right? Often we will still hold them responsible. It might matter, whether they took the drugs or were drugged, but we might think the responsibility is lessened, right? Well, why? Maybe the link between that person's character and their actions isn't completely gone, but it's weakened, right? Things you do when you're drunk or drugged aren't as neatly linked to your character as things you do when you're completely sober. All right. Now, compatibilism is a trendy position in contemporary philosophy. And there's even some pretty good literary defenses of compatibilism. There's a sci-fi story I thought about giving you guys. Really, really good story by Ted Chiang. I did give you guys a story about him at the end of the unit. It's much shorter, but there's a really good one where he basically defends a compatibilist view of freedom. I might actually put it up just in case you guys want to read it. It's an awesome story. It's called, I think it's called like Fear. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which is a quote from this philosopher Kierkegaard. I didn't assign it to you guys because it's like 70 pages. It's more accurate to call it a novella. And I think, Chiang does a good job of sketching what's attractive about compatibilism and giving a compatibilist position. I am ultimately not satisfied with compatibilism. Nagel isn't, Taylor isn't, there are a lot of smart people in philosophy who are. I would think it's honestly the trendy or almost default position in contemporary philosophy. It's not like everybody agrees, but more than not, right? And there are some smart, perceptive people like Ted Chiang who like compatibilism. I think it has some obvious problems, though. Like Taylor, the determinist, and Nagel, the libertarian, I'm uneasy with compatibilism, and I'll tell you why. For one thing, we do seem to hold people responsible for things that are out of character, right? If somebody who is a nice, forgiving, sweet, wonderful person most of the time just one day loses it and just beats the stuffing out of their neighbor over some dispute about like the property line or something silly, because this is so out of character, we'd probably look and say, well, is he drugged? Did something happen? But if it's just, no, this one day he just decided he wasn't going to take it anymore and decided to beat the living crap out of this guy. Even if this is very much out of character, even if he never did anything like this before or after, we'd still say he's responsible, right? Now, I think what a compatibilist would say was, well, my account still holds, actually beating up his neighbor, that's in character. It's just it reveals part of his character you didn't see before. I don't know. Then we start to be getting pretty loose with what we mean by character. I kind of worry about that response. Also, to me, there seemed to, and this is a little harder to articulate, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but to me at least, there seems to be a difference between judgments about someone having bad character and acting badly, right? I can think someone is a shabby person, that they have bad character, but when they actually do something bad, that seems a different kind of blame than just thinking they don't have great character, right? It's hard to articulate this. Maybe the difference isn't that neat. It's hard to neatly pull apart character and actions, but there just seems to be something a little something off about it. But the deeper reason here is, what if the person has no control over what their character is like? We would think that's reason not to hold them responsible, right? Normally, I think we hold people responsible for their character because we think they play a role in shaping their character. If somebody's lazy, well, part of the reason he's lazy is he's formed habits of character that make him lazy, right? If someone's courageous, we think he has done stuff, faced his fears, practiced, done stuff that makes him courageous, right? If someone is dishonest, we think they have gotten into a habit of lying. If it turns out that people have no control over their character, all these individual actions that make your character, if for those actions they couldn't have acted differently, if their character's not up to them, do we really blame them, or should we blame them for their character? Part of the reason we praise or blame people for actions that are in character, we think people have a role in forming their character. If they don't, if we just point out, well, the action stems from the person's character, how much does that show? The worry is that compatibilism just pushes the whole problem back a step, right? If none of it's up to you, if all your choices are determined, then why praise or blame your character, right? It seems that your character is just due to genes or environment, some combination of the two. And isn't that just luck? You have a good environment, you become hardworking and honest. You have a bad environment, you become dishonest and lazy. If none of it is up to you, if you don't have an ability to become brave by doing brave things, or hopefully not, but does happen, dishonest or cruel by doing dishonest and cruel things, if you can't choose those individual actions, then aren't bad character traits just like diseases like narcolepsy? Narcolepsy is due to some combination of genes and environment. Well, if your choices are all determined, well, then your character is due to genes and environment. How does bad character differ from a disease or a disability? both come down to factors we can't control. So that's my reason. I think compatibilism just kind of pushes things back a step. You're responsible if it stems from the kind of person you are, but all that I think seems plausible because we think people have control over what kind of people they are through their choices. It's clever, and I suspect that explains some of its attraction to philosophers. We like really clever stuff, sometimes too clever for our own good. But to me, it just seems a cop-out. It seems to sweep the problem under the rug. Now, look, I don't know. Like I said, there are some smart, perceptive people who like compatibilism, who are convinced it's true. The Chang story, which I will try to find in post if you guys just want to read it, does a really good job of making compatibilism look attractive and plausible. I actually like the story quite a bit. At the end of the day, I'm just not convinced for the reasons I laid out. So, for that reason, I'm going to set compatibilism aside for the time being, talk about whether determinism is true. Talk about this argument that Taylor offers for determinism. Or what he calls fatalism, but I really think, fatalism is just a more wide-ranging view. Determinism is part of that.